I'm going to start with a few words of introduction. My name is Gabe Mulley. Many of you know me as Mulby on the GitHub repos. My icon matches my face, so hopefully I'm recognizable. You'll see me trolling around mostly the analytics repos, but also some of the other edX repos. I've been at edX for about 2.5 years, pretty much since the beginning of the analytics team. I'm first and foremost an analytics team member. I wear a bunch of other hats as well. I primarily focus on the data pipeline. I also do a bunch of the ops work for the analytics team. And most importantly, I juggle. I'm mostly going to be talking about analytics today, though, and not juggling. Come see Ned or I later if you'd like to juggle. This is the current composition of the edX analytics engineering team. I'm sort of here speaking on their behalf. There have been many very talented people that have been on the team before us, and many very significant contributions from the community. The ideas that I'm expressing here are not just my own. There's been a lot of great groundwork that's been done in the past that I cannot take credit for, unfortunately. Wish I could. So this is going to be the outline for today. I'm going to start with some context and talk through some of the sort of philosophical underpinnings of edX's choices in the way that we analyze data. I'm then going to talk through some of the challenges that are commonly encountered when you're working with the edX data set. I've seen a few of you give talks about dealing with the edX data, and so I think we're not alone in digging into the raw data. So we'll talk through some of the challenges we've hit in the past, solutions that we've employed to deal with those issues. And finally, I'm going to try and leave some time at the end for Q&A. I've had a bunch of great conversations with you already throughout the conference, but I expect there are more questions out there, so I'm going to try and save some time for that. So first, the context and sort of foundation. I like to start this conversation with the stakeholders. First and foremost, all of our analytics efforts are really focused on the learner. Although we don't actually produce many tools that are directly visible to the learner, all of our tools are in service of the learner. We really want them to have the best educational experience possible when they come to edX and use an open edX instance. And so really, it's about keeping them engaged, keeping them interested, and most importantly, actually learning. So most of our tools are actually provided to the instructor. And that's Insights, which many of you are familiar with already. It is our primary instructor-facing tool and analytics dashboard. And that's what I'm mostly going to be talking about today. We also have a bunch of code that's focused on the researchers and really delivering raw data to them. And some of you have actually done research on the data. There are a plethora of researchers out there who are asking some really good questions and working with the raw data to find some answers. The next chunk of code that we have is really focused on the analysts. And I've heard a bunch of interest from you about reporting and analytics for your organization. This is obviously important to edX. I'm going to be really focusing this talk on the instructors. I'd love to talk to you separately about the researcher and the analyst-facing problems as well. Some really interesting stuff there. So I like to show this as sort of the antithesis or an anti-example. It's what I call the intriguing but useless dashboard. And I think those of us who have worked with dashboards in the past have encountered these dashboards. You walk up to them, you look at them, you see a bunch of charts and numbers, and you say, that's interesting. And then you walk away and don't really do anything. And that's really the thing that we're trying to avoid. We really wanted to produce analytics that have an impact. And so what does this look like? Well, often we're dealing with very complicated problems. There's no formula for learner engagement. We don't have, it's not a well-understood problem. And so we're really trying to work with this nebulous, very difficult thing and make forward progress. So how do we do that? A classic technique is using feedback. So we're really looking to first observe what's happening. And this is going to become a feedback cycle. Next, we want to interpret those observations. So we look at what's happening, we make some assumptions, some hypotheses, and then finally, we want to take action and actually improve whatever it is that we're trying to improve. And so often we have some objective in mind. We want to increase learner engagement. And so first we need to see what's going on. We then want to make some changes, and hopefully those actually result in a positive increase in learner engagement. And so you sort of start the cycle all over again. So whatever changes you made, you want to see what happened as a result of those, make new interpretation of that data, and finally take action. And this is really fundamental to our tools. We really thought that the data has to be actionable for it to be useful. So what does this look like in practice in Insights? So I've put here a snippet of our video analysis tool. On the x-axis is time, and that's an offset from the beginning of the video. And the y-axis is the number of learners who have watched that 5-second segment of the video. So the pink arrow is not actually provided by Insights. When we talk about observing what's happening, we're really talking about providing the instructor with this chart. They can now finally see what's happening in their videos. The interpretation is represented by that pink arrow. The instructor has looked at the information and has seen an interesting pattern, and that's the big dip at the beginning of this video. So the instructor then has something to look into. They've got some investigation to do in order to interpret this correctly. They go and look at the video. It turns out in this particular case, the lecture was filmed on campus and then put into the MOOC directly. And at the beginning of the lecture, a local club at the university is advertising for their club. And so they're trying to recruit new membership. Now you can imagine in a MOOC setting, that's sort of ridiculous. The students are not interested in the local club at this university. And so they're just skipping over this part of the video, which is causing a dip in the viewership for this segment of the video. So what actions can we take here? I think it's fairly obvious to everyone in the room. You want to cut this segment from your video. It's not helping your student experience. So that's the feedback cycle working, and that's really the goal when we built a lot of the charts in Insights. And so there's a fair amount of complexity underneath that, as many of you know, those of you who have tried to set up Insights. But to get that chart that we can take action on, we have to jump through some hoops. And so I guess what challenges do you face? What stands in between you, the raw data, fire hose, and that chart? I'm going to walk through a few of them right now. So I'm going to be continuing on this video usage example because I think it's a very illustrative one. Videos are one of the primary content delivery mechanisms for our edX courses, and I imagine for many of your courses in the open edX ecosystem as well. People invest a huge amount of resources in the videos, and so we really want to nail them. They've got to be really, really good. So we tried to provide this tool to give people some visibility into what's working and what's not working in their videos. Another example of a type of interpretation that you can do from these charts is that dark blue area represents the parts of the video that were rewatched. And so this bump that's pointed to by the pink arrow is an area that the students watched repeatedly. And so often this can be a confusing topic. I think in the Tokyo Tech talk, they were talking about it might be an answer to an exercise. There's a lot of different things that could cause this bump. And we really leave it up to the instructor to use their judgment and their context to figure out what actions to take based on this information. Because frankly, they have the most information. We could have built some really fancy machine learning thing, but we figured we'd leverage people's wetware, the best computer between our ears. So the raw data, I guess, is where I'll start. It's in the tracking log. We record play video events, pause video events, seek video events, et cetera, and I'll go into the full state machine in a moment. For those of you that aren't familiar with the tracking log, I thought I would give a brief overview. They're really a record of who did what when. They're observations and not interpretations. So I thought I would drill into this in a little bit more detail. It's a bit of a generalization. I'm sure there are some that are interpretations, but you could imagine a world where instead of recording when people had played and paused the video, we instead emitted an event that was very focused on the particular type of analysis that we wanted to do. So we could have, for example, a fully watched event. And in the LMS, we would keep track of the person's progress to the video, and we might define fully watched as having started at the beginning and watched 70% of the way through the video. And that's all well and good. You put this code in the LMS, and it starts firing off these fully watched events over time. At some point in the future, you decide that that's actually not really the definition of fully watched that you had intended, and it's not really working out the way that you wanted. And so you want to now change the definition to watching 90% of the video and starting at any point, just watching 90% of any part of the video. Now, all of a sudden, you've lost all of the information about what happened prior to that point in time. And so all of that previous very valuable information is lost to you, and you have to start from scratch whenever you update the code in your LMS. And so instead of emitting fully watched events, we instead opted to just capture what happened. They clicked play, they clicked pause, they skipped around in the video, et cetera. And then layer on the interpretation later in the analysis process. We try and keep this format as stable as possible. Those of you who work with the data know that we're not 100% successful, but we try very hard. We capture data from the mobile devices and the desktop browsers. It's rather raw. I'll get into some of the ways that this is visible to the analyst. And it's very well documented. We will post a link to this deck, and I've included some links throughout it, and you can click through if you want to see. There's quite comprehensive documentation for the events in the tracking log. There's all sorts of observations in there. So what does this look like for the video data? What events are fired by the LMS out of the box? Your LMS is probably firing these today. When the user first loads the page, they see a load video event. That goes into the tracking log. They're now in the never played state. They've never actually played the video. They're just sitting there, and it's sitting there, and everybody's happy. They click the play button, and a play video event is emitted. It's fairly straightforward. The video would then be playing. If they can also just immediately skip to some part of the video. People don't really do this because they don't know where to skip to in the video. They can pause it while it's playing. They can skip while it's paused, and it will remain paused. They can play it once it's paused. And they can skip while it's playing, and it will keep playing. If the video stops of its own accord, you get to the end of the video, a stop video event is emitted. So when we go to analyze the data, we really expect it to follow this state machine. In practice, this doesn't really happen. So an example of one of the types of issues we saw in the data when we went to go actually build this tool in Insights is illustrated here. So I'll interpret this chart for you. On the x-axis is time. On the y-axis is a count of play video events for one particular user in one particular course looking at one particular video. So you can see that there's an awful lot of play video events for this user. And just to really make it explicit, there's actually 900 play video events here that were emitted for this particular user in this particular video in roughly 2 minutes. Now, if you'll recall, the play video event is emitted when the user clicks the play button. I would be very surprised if this user clicked the play button 900 times in 2 minutes. That is not, in fact, what happened. After much investigation, we discovered that for users on slow internet connections, when the video buffered and restarted, a play video event was being emitted every time the video restarted. So thanks to video buffering and buggy JavaScript, we ended up with a lot of noise in the data there. And so you could imagine if you were just counting play video events, you could end up with a very misleading result by just looking at this data and just counting things. More issues that we discovered as we dug into this data in depth. We saw play video events without any subsequent pause, seek, or stop. So this user just disappeared. Hopefully they're OK. We saw invalid events in timestamps. So we might see a relative time of 2 years from the beginning of the video. I don't know of any videos on edX.org that are 2 years long, so that's probably not correct either. We saw cases where videos were swapped out by the course author, so they overwrote the video. Previously it was a 5-minute video, they replaced it with a 10-minute video without the module ID actually changing as far as the edX platform was concerned. So that can really mess up your analytics. And we saw invalid state transitions. You name it. It should be following that state diagram. It pretty much wasn't. We still don't know the root cause of many of those issues. And long ago, we decided, I don't know who decided this, but somebody decided not to include the duration information in the events. And so this also further complicated the analysis. So you can imagine the combination of the invalid timestamps of 2 years plus no duration information makes it very difficult to tell which events are real and which events are not real. Or that are correct and from some buggy software somewhere. So that's a lot of problems. We still were hyper-focused on that chart, though. We really wanted to give the instructors the visibility into the data in a way that they could actually take action on it. And so we can't just give them this buggy data. We need to come up with something better. And so we chose to use Python. And those of you who have looked at the edX analytics data pipeline see that we have a rather sizable amount of Python code that's used to analyze this data. And it both does that state machine analysis as well as compensating where possible for those issues that we know about in the data to try and give people the most accurate and stable picture of what's going on. So in the case of this video analysis, there's actually 600 lines of code and comments in the video.py file. I've included a link at the bottom there. You can go check it out. And it's working around many of these issues and also navigating the state machine. So as we did more and more of these things, we had to make some difficult choices. And I think many of you are familiar with these difficult choices. And so we had to prioritize certain efforts over other efforts. And I thought I would just very explicitly call those out because at the end of the day, we want that actionable chart. And in order to get there, we had to put our focus in certain areas before others. We decided to prioritize flexible analysis over perfectly clean input. And that's largely because we wanted to leverage the value of our historical data. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a moment. We decided to prioritize accuracy and stability over algorithmic simplicity. You saw we just had 600 lines of code to do an analysis. Many would not call that a simple algorithm. And we also decided to prioritize scalability over operational simplicity. And I'd like to emphasize that I'm really calling this prioritization because the things on the right still are very important, and we actually did spend a bunch of time and energy trying to optimize for those things as well. But we really decided to nail the things on the left before we focused on the things on the right. So for flexible analysis, what does this look like? Well, one, it lets us run that state machine. Two, it allows us to give our problematic data a great big hug and really just accept that it's there and work around it as best we can whenever possible. There are certain types of problems you cannot work around, like missing data, but we do our best. We recognize the value of our historical data. Because somebody early on made a really good decision and focused on those observations, we had a huge treasure trove of high-value historical data. There's a huge amount to be gained from analyzing that historical data. And so we really wanted to be able to analyze that buggy old data whenever possible. And we recognized that we had unknown questions. This was not a well-known domain where we knew exactly the types of analytics that we wanted to execute and knew exactly what types of input data we were going to be dealing with. So we wanted to try and give ourselves as much flexibility as possible. We recognized that we were going to be dealing with many different data sources and formats. We're pulling from the PayPal XML APIs for financial reconciliation, which I don't know when they were built, maybe 1999 or something. And then we're also pulling our sort of modern tracking log data in JSON format. We're pulling from MySQL databases. We're pulling from all over the place. And we wanted to give ourselves as much flexibility there as possible so that we could mix and match those data sources to provide the most accurate picture possible. Which brings me to accuracy and stability. So I think that this is actually one of the most important things with an analytics product. Your users have to trust the data that they're seeing. They have to trust that they can take action on it and that it's actually correct. If they go and look at the chart and then do something based on that observation, they make whatever interpretation, and then it turns out that the chart was wrong, they're going to feel betrayed. And the next time they go to use your tool, they're going to doubt and question what they're seeing in that chart. And so it's really important that we provide them with an accurate and stable view into what's happening and what the truth is. So this one I know is a huge pain point for the open source community, so I'm apologizing right now. Scalability, we really had to build for edX scale. And those of you with small installations feel the impact of this because we chose Hadoop, and that's operationally complex, and I apologize for that. We've tried to put as much automation around that as possible. But what does this look like for us? So on the x-axis of this chart is time. On the y-axis is gigabytes of tracking logs produced in a given day. You can see a sort of troubling trend here for us as an organization. In September of 2013, which is when I joined edX, we were emitting about 80 gigabytes of data to the tracking log per day. In September of 2015, we were emitting 380 gigabytes of tracking log data. So this is an almost 5x increase in the amount of data that we're dealing with on a monthly basis. So we really needed to have some tool that could scale with us as we grew as an organization. And frankly, I hope that all of you have this problem too. I think this is the best type of problem to have as an installation, right? So just for a little bit more context, in May of 2014, we had a script that was processing the complete history of the data, and it was taking roughly 20 hours to complete. Python script, single-threaded Python script. So you can imagine if we were to run that today, it would be very problematic for us. All right, so having to make some of those difficult choices, we ended up with the data pipeline that you see today. I'm hoping that you all can leverage it for your installations as well. And I think that those priorities really help Insights be the tool that it is and be as useful as it is. So how does this play out in Insights? Fundamentally, Insights is a tool that lets you observe. It tells you what happened. And because of all that work we did on the data pipeline, it allows you to trust what you're seeing. And so you as an instructor have now a very effective tool that you can employ to make your content better, have your users be more engaged with your courses and your platform, et cetera. So we really focused on observations that are ready for interpretation. As I said before, we did not implement any peak detection in the video analysis or any other fancy machine learning, et cetera. We decided to leverage the context that the instructors already have. And fundamentally, and most importantly, we needed the data to be actionable. If you're not taking action, then we're basically just wasting our time looking at pretty pictures. So our newest feature, Learner Analytics, it provides us visibility into what each user is doing in your course. So I imagine this will be fairly useful to all of you. And this is coming in Eucalyptus. It's currently on master, though, in our repos. So an example of the type of interpretation we might do here is, given this table of all the users in our course, we might be looking for users that are struggling. And so I've put myself in here with a sort of problematic state of having tried 20 problems, only getting 7 correct, and not engaging with any videos or discussions. And so you as an instructor now have a tool to at least have some visibility into this type of situation. And you can interpret it as you will. It might be, in this case, that this user isn't watching the videos because they had a really negative experience with them or what have you. So the actions you can do here, you can reach out to this user. You can talk to them. You can see why they're not watching the videos. Why are they not engaging with the discussion content? And sort of have an inquiring mind. They continue to try stuff and not succeed and not engage with the videos. What's going on here? Enrollment over time. So the classic use case for this is a marketing use case. Note that the pink boxes in this chart are not visible in Insights. I've put those, our documentation team put those in to the chart in kind of post-production. What might be going on here? So you'll notice there's 3 sharp increases in enrollment over time here. You as the instructor might know that you had sent out marketing emails on these 3 times, and perhaps you sent out one in between the left 2 boxes there. And so now you've got some really valuable information because you can look at this chart, see these discontinuities, and you know now that whatever patterns whatever techniques you used in those 3 marketing emails were really, really effective, and whatever techniques you used in the email that resulted in no change were not so effective. And so you're now enabled to take action and repeat the good things and get rid of the not so good things. Answer distribution, this is another tool that we provide to instructors. I'll read the text in this chart because it's probably not legible from your distance, but the question here posed to the student is, what continent is 98% covered with ice? So the blue bars on the left, I'm now interpreting the chart. The blue bars on the left indicate correct answers. The user had responded with Antarctica. The first one is with a capital A. The second is with a lowercase a. The third bar is, the first red bar, is empty, which means the user didn't respond to the question. And then the next 2 rather large bars there are actually misspellings of the word Antarctica. So unless you were actually testing the user on spelling, which maybe you were, and that's fine, you may not be actually testing for what you're trying to. And so what actions can you take here? I think it's fairly obvious. You can go back into your problem. You can either put in some hints, put in these common misspellings, let people know that they perhaps misspelled their answer, or you could even just mark it correct, depending on your approach as an instructor. So really, this is about, and I'll reiterate the point, it's about improving these outcomes and objectives with feedback. These are not well understood systems. We don't have a magic formula, so we just have to look at what's going on, make some assumptions, make some interpretations, and take some actions to try and make it better. And we're always on the lookout for new types of analytics and new types of charts, visualizations, et cetera, that we can provide to our instructors, to our analysts, et cetera, to help them make good decisions. So what can you all do to help? I have been encouraging you all in person, and I will encourage you from here as well, to design impactful analytics. Whether or not you're using edX Insights and our data pipeline, we're all very interested in the types of charts and visualizations that are actionable and that provide these positive outcomes. And so whether it's in Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, or whether it's in Splunk or whatever, the chart is the really valuable thing. So I encourage you all to share your ideas and share your work. Not all of you are using our data pipeline. I know that some of you are using Splunk, et cetera. And so even if you're off the beaten path, I encourage you to share with one another, and we can all benefit from that. So we have the Open edX Analytics list. And we are actively trying to encourage more of this type of discussion on the list. Right now it's very tactical with installation problems for Insights and that sort of thing. But we'd love to hear what types of analytics have been working for you and your organizations. And I hope that we can all end up producing impactful dashboards. When we give that visibility and we really enable people to take action, we can actually make forward progress. And so I encourage you all, and I wish on all of you impactful analytics, and I hope to see what you all produce. All right, that's all I had. Thank you very much. So I did manage to save time for questions. Lucky you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So sort of a double barrel question relating to the insights front end on top of analytics. Firstly, there's an enormous amount of data that the pipeline can pull in
Yes.
that is not represented in the insights front end, specifically like event reports and things like that. And also on top of that, the one thing that the insights front end doesn't really do very well is drill down through the data or link the data to the learner side of the stuff coming in. In terms of the insights front end, are there upgrades coming to that? Are you working on that, or is it all focused on the pipeline itself?
Yeah, so I'll just repeat the question so that the people on the video can hear. So the two questions were, there's a huge amount of data that's available to the data pipeline and is ingested by it, but not necessarily exposed through the insights front end. And the second part of the question was kind of a roadmap question. Which parts of those things are we planning on building, and do we have plans for building out drill downs into more specific people in insights? And so for the first question, I think it's really fundamentally about the audience. And so when we think about the instructor who's consuming insights, we really try and target those visualizations at that group of people. And so again, if we find a particular type of visualization that we think can drive action and really enable them to do impactful things, then we absolutely want to pull that through to the dashboard. And I encourage all of you, if you have ideas for those things, like engage with us early, and we can help develop something that the community as a whole can benefit from. As far as the drill down, at our scale, obviously there's some issues with sort of having per student. And in fact, we had to jump through some technical hoops just to make the table view work. So we have courses with 500,000 students in them, for example. There are certain limits to that. I think, however, that as an open source community, there'd be a lot of interest in that sort of thing. And so we'd absolutely accept contributions that allowed that type of investigation. That said, we have targeted insights more at people that are there and expecting sort of a more packaged experience. We provide the raw data package for researchers and others that want to do really complicated analysis. Yes, in the back.
So I'm thinking about Professor Stevens' conversation with us this morning.
Yeah.
So I have one thing from a corporate perspective I want to talk about in a sec, but the first thing was I was wondering about, how you showed us the video diff.
Yes.
And how that should just be X'd out of the video. Have the bulk of professors been receptive? I'm thinking about the professor as sovereign now. Have they been receptive to this kind of data? That's my first thing.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the question was, given the keynote this morning and the sovereignty of professors in their own classrooms, how do they feel about the analytics recommending that they axe parts of their video, et cetera? So frankly, I don't actually have a huge amount of visibility into that. I really enjoyed the Tokyo Tech talk earlier today because I love to hear about how people are using it and the specific use cases that people have come up with. So we do get some feedback from instructors. I have not heard personally from an instructor who said, oh man, Insights exposed a horrible part of my lecture and I had to cut it and that's terrible, I hate you all. And certainly sitting in some of the other talks, it seemed like instructors are pretty open to adapting their content for the format and understand that it's not going to translate perfectly. But I don't know.
And then just from a corporate perspective, I'll say that we're not allowed to, especially in particular countries, but we just blanketly aren't allowed to share individual data with anybody but the first line manager.
Sure.
So that's just something to keep in mind, that I couldn't go back as the instructor to the, and do an interview of the learner and say, gee, what happened here? Or, I can see we can help you. And a second thing though is there anything, and this is in the realm of how do we figure out new stuff to do together, but for example, with what I work on, Watson Academy, we found that sellers who used Watson Academy were able to sell Watson technology at a rate of 7 percentage points higher, than those who hadn't. They were exceeding their quota, I should say, by 7 percentage points. Now, none of this could have helped us with that. What we ended up having to do was go into the super top secret, and we couldn't. We had to get agents, who are allowed to go into the super top secret HR data to find out how much money had each of these individual sellers made who had come through the academy versus those who hadn't. Is there anything at all that, could work in what you're doing to help us find, those are the things that my corporation wants to know. Are people selling more, having taken this learning?
Sure, right. And yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the holy grail, right? Like we want to know if, sorry, I'll repeat the question. So the question was, there's some sort of downstream indicator of success. So if the user has really, if I'm interpreting this correctly, if they've really learned the material, they're going to have higher performance in their sales numbers. And so really that's the metric that we really care about, but it might be lagging a fair amount after the course has run. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. Sure, yeah. And so this is definitely a difficult problem. I mean, obviously that sort of feedback cycle doesn't have to be executed on a daily or an hourly basis. I think it could be between course runs. And so I don't actually see any problem with pulling those types of reports after, and actually having that report in a tool like Insights after the course has completed. It would require external, you'd have to have some programmatic way of getting at their sales number and anonymizing it, or I don't know. But it could give you some indication of whether your course was successful or not, I imagine. But again, you need that sort of programmatic access to that information, which it sounds like you don't actually have in your case. But I think that we all want people to get better jobs. We want them to succeed in their careers. And a lot of these things are very difficult to measure, and they're going to happen well after the course has ended. And it would be great if we could get that feedback and include that information for instructors for the next time they go to run their course, et cetera. Anything else? Yes?
On the technical implementation, I follow the thread on the mailing list. Is there any big changes coming up? Something in the pipeline that's scheduled to, or is there work going on into changing some big parts of the technical details of that?
Yeah, so the question is, again, sort of a roadmap question. Are we planning on changing the technology in any significant ways in the near future? The short answer is no. I think the biggest change that we're thinking about and doing discovery on is actually swapping out our data warehouse technology, Vertica, but that's still in discovery. We're not exactly sure. We're very committed to Luigi as sort of our workflow engine and our framework for structuring the data pipelines. Obviously, very committed to Django and those technologies. Hadoop, again, I'm open to changing it. It's, I've said this to several people, but fundamentally it's taking some input and producing some output. And so swapping in Spark or something like that is totally fine. And I would, if someone in the community wants to take that on, I'm absolutely happy to talk to you about that. But we're not planning any big changes like that. All right, great. Thanks so much, everybody.